We have Emily Coleman joining us, and she's just going to talk about how she chose her new advocacy reference program platform without trying to give away too many details into what she actually chose, because it's not so much the actual platform, but what works best for your team, your company, your needs, all of that. If she decides she wants to say anything later on, she's more than happy, more than welcome to. Or if she says she's open to messages, then you can message her. That's up to her. Emily, go ahead and take it away. Oh, this is CMA Weekly, by the way.
Awesome. Okay, so I did put together a deck. I'm hoping to go through it in about like 15, 20-ish minutes, and then we should have plenty of time to do some questions. So I'm hoping that everyone is able to see my screen. If you can't,
Yeah,
please let me know.
we can see.
Alrighty. So let's go through what we're gonna talk about. So and one thing that we're not, and Mary kind of already covered this. So really, like, for me, step one is how do we uncover what it is that you actually need from a customer advocacy platform? How do you do a thorough, effective evaluation and really direct your own demo process? How do you prevent buyer's remorse? And the one thing not discussing today is really specific platforms or vendors for all the reasons that Mary just described, but hoping to give you some really good stuff to take away here. So first of all, why is it so freaking hard to pick the right thing? I'm going to start with like kind of the end in mind. Like, how do we prevent buyer's remorse? Well, it's because it's freaking hard. So everything looks good in a demo. Demos are, a lot of us are in SaaS. They're meant to sell and they're crafted to you. So they're not necessarily meant to like solve an issue, but they're meant to get you to buy. So don't lose sight of that when you're doing your demos. And I say that again as somebody in SaaS who helps make demos to get people to buy. There isn't a tool today that really can do it all yet. The customer advocacy space just is not as mature as sales enablement or demand SaaS products. And that's just where we are today. Some of that is due to Influitive's whole thing, plus some other stuff that's been going on. And also, I think just maturity in the space and what customer marketing and advocacy is. Your tools can't compensate for a bad process. So I think sometimes, especially in marketing, we get this feeling that like we're just one platform away from like cracking the code. And it's just not the reality. No tool is going to compensate for, poor enablement with sales or poor adoption with sales or without a really good strategy on how you're going to get it done. So this is another reason why it's hard to pick the right thing, because you've got to solve for some things that are outside of your own experience and area of expertise. Great segue here. There's a disconnect between sales and marketing. We don't always have the same idea for what good looks like, and how this like will show up is that sales would like to pick whoever they want and kind of not involve marketing, and their motivation is to make money, and whatever it takes to make money and like fill their quota is what they're going to do. And so you really have to solve for how do I make it very easy for them to do the thing that I want them to do, and very difficult to have bad practices, like overusing references or using references in a situation where we probably shouldn't have brought in a customer, those types of things. And then often what I find is that budget becomes a lot more important than value. The cheaper or more expensive alternative isn't always better, but we're often letting kind of budget dictate how we're choosing what it is that we're doing. So these are some of the things that like you're always going to want to be thinking about when you're looking to pick a solution. And if you take nothing else away from this presentation, I have made one slide that is the most important thing. You cannot pick the right solution until you understand what your problem is. And this is for customer advocacy, customer marketing, and anything else you're doing. In fact, like 90% of my presentation today is helping you identify what your problem is because this is the single most important thing that you can do. You must understand what it is that you need and the problem you are trying to solve. We're not looking for, we're not doing solutions in search of a problem. We need to come to the table with a very well-defined problem statement. So how do we do that? We have what I like to call creative problem solving cycle, where the very first part of this cycle is we need to do some problem finding. We need to identify what the fuzzy situation is and get better at anticipating and sensing what the problems are, what the technology trends are, and what your company's needs are. So this is like, when you have this kind of sense of, oh, it seems like we're encountering an issue with our outbound strategic opportunities. That would be kind of a little bit of a fuzzy situation. Next, you need to do some fact finding. This means gather information directly related to your fuzzy situation by asking some of these scope broadening questions. We need to understand intent, and then we need to get narrow by identifying stumbling blocks. What's stopping us from solving this problem today? What are the things that are happening? This can be accomplished by doing a lot of interviews. So this is a really good thing to do when you come brand new into an organization, because you can begin by asking very, very stupid questions and no one's going to be upset. So this is something I would recommend doing if you're coming into a new role, which is you may be given a list of people to meet with. And one of the questions I always ask is, who else should I meet with? And you should pack your schedule with meeting with people. When I started at Launch Darkly back in October, I think I met with probably close to 60 or 70 people, all the way from like leadership down to individual AEs, CSMs, SDRs, BDRs, people in marketing, people in product. And I was asking them a lot of questions about like, what are your biggest problems right now? And using that to then build out what it was that I wanted to do with the advocacy program going forward. So like put on your Loom or your Zoom AI companion, get all those transcripts. This is a good place to use ChatGPT to define some common trends here by gathering all that information and putting it together. Next, you'll actually define your problem. And I'm going to give you in the next slide a preview of like what exactly an example of what this looked like for me to really make this solidified. But you want to get your angle of approach right. And you want to understand what are those stumbling blocks? What are the things that we're trying to do? And you want to come up with a couple of really, really good problem statements that are well grounded in what you learned during fact finding and your problem finding exercises. You should not move on until you've done this.
Emily,
and as cheesy as it's, yeah.
will you be kind of giving any suggestions for what like the problem finding or the fact finding or
Yes.
problem? Okay, thank you.
Yep. I will go through, I'll actually go really specific into what mine looked like so
Okay,
that it's not just hypothetical. Yep.
thank you.
Next, your idea findings. This is where you start brainstorming all the ideas, all the different ways you want to approach it. Some of these will be like software related, and some of these are going to be not software related, and they're going to be process related. So, keep an open mind. Not everything needs SaaS. And then lastly, you'll do your evaluating and selecting, which we often start here and use this to define what our problems are. Don't let vendors do your evaluating or your problem finding for you. Like start here rather than here. Okay, what does this look like? So this is a nice little messy map that I put together that is actually very similar to what I had in a very long, sprawling Google Doc. And one of the things that I learned just from I would say, fuzzy situation, the fuzzy situation when I came in was they hired me to do customer advocacy. So there must be something here that they're trying to solve with that. So like, what is it that we think that they're trying to solve? And I came across several of these fuzzy situations, but I kind of landed on this very high level one here, which is what's stopping us from reaching our revenue goals. And the next thing you're going to want to do is ask yourself, um, what's stopping us from reaching these revenue goals? So I identified, okay, we are not closing, we have a much lower close rate on our outbound deals than we do inbound. And there's a pretty big gap there. We're also maybe not closing as many of our new business strategic deals as we should. We're just not seeing those close as quickly. And the next question is, what's stopping us from closing outbound deals? Now, how do you get here? This is again just by asking questions. So you need to just really start pretty open-ended with the people that you're meeting with and asking them, like, not necessarily related to customer marketing or customer advocacy, but what is your actual biggest pain point right now? Like, what is really bothering you? Just related generally to your job. And I heard a lot of like, we're failing to move people from discovery to stage one, or um, you know, when a customer asks me, do we have any customers who have done this? I don't know where to go. I'm Googling things. I'm not really sure. And so I'm not able to give customers or prospects the evidence that I want to, like right off of hand. One thing I heard a lot from leadership, for example, was we just don't have a lot of these audible ready stories. If you ask a lot of questions about, well, why do you think that matters? Like, what would that solve for you if they did it? It really ultimately boiled down to they wanted to reach revenue goals. And this is going to be your metric at the end about how you're defining your success. We want to see us reaching revenue goals. How do we contribute to that? How do I contribute to that? Once you ask some of these questions, you can ask things like, okay, what's stopping us from closing our outbound deals? What's stopping us from closing our strat deals? We have a lot of platforms that launch darkly, one of which is Closed, which does like close loss analysis. They do interviews with, both closed won and closed loss deals. And I looked through all that data. I went and looked through Gong calls. I listened to hundreds of Gong calls and found there were a couple of key things that happened that I felt like were really important related to what I did, which is we really struggled to get executive buyer approval. We had internal champions who were really excited about it, but they couldn't necessarily translate the value to the person who was signing the checks. The other was they didn't maybe see the ROI or the value there. We in my space, a lot of it is like, should we build versus buy? And so it's overcoming the why should I pay someone to do something when developer Bob can make this in SharePoint and it works fine. How do we actually connect that there's a value in buying? In the strat deals, it's we're struggling to differentiate from competitors. We're seeing competitors a lot more in strat deals, and we're not doing a great job identifying how we're different from them. We also had an executive buyer approval problem here, and we were finding maybe that the deal cycles were just so long that we were kind of losing momentum and we weren't able to close, and we were just kind of stuck in a POV that just didn't seem to really move forward.
Emily?
And
Evan Jacobs had a question. You mind if I read it off?
Go for it.
Okay, about the stakeholder interviews, I believe. Well, you didn't call it that, or maybe you did and I missed it. Did you use the same similar questions for each person you spoke to on your listening tour?
I did. Yeah. So I did like a first group of people where I asked really broad questions, and those were usually leadership. And then once I'd met with leadership and kind of understood some broader goals, I did restructure those questions, but I had like five that I went through in order. And then when I went to meet with like, folks who were really like in the field on the ground doing stuff, I used those questions from leadership to define a second set that were very tactical.
And if either of you want to share what those questions looked like, please do. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I do not remember them off the top of my head. That was back in November, and I've deleted all my memories from November. I only like I'm on a 30-day rolling basis of remembering things. So, but I have them written down and I can share.
Do you use ChatGPT for that rolling memory delete stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. It's use Binance to keep me in check. So At the end of the day, these are some things here that I said, all right, there's some places that we probably need to inject some solutions. And this is the beginning of understanding what these solutions are. Um, but really, when I'm thinking about customer references in particular, the question is, how can we get executive buyer approval? How can we shorten the deal cycle? And how can we differentiate from competitors? Customer references really for me are the way that we solve these issues, but these are my problem statements. So then when I'm going into doing evaluation, I'm thinking about how do these solutions help me do these things? Does that make sense? Is that really like high level and off the wall, or is there a clear connection here from like how we get to these problem statements and how that helps us like think through what it is we want to do next?
You guys can just do like a thumbs up or something in chat if that helps.
Yeah, because I can see on the screen. Hopefully. If not, I can answer some more questions to make that clear. But so now we're brainstorming our solutions. So SaaS isn't always the answer, but for me, it was thinking about these three things. It's customer evidence. So we needed a wide variety of proof points that set us apart from competitors and demonstrated value and ROI. This is where I started. I did not start here. I wanted to start here because what I heard was that really our sellers wanted to know what our success stories were. And I wanted to do that before we brought customer references in the mix because I knew that this would be kind of an easy button for, oh, I'll just get a reference for you and they can talk through the value. We needed to start here and then move to here. Your process may be different, but this is how I approached it. And lastly, sales enablement. I knew it was going to be huge, and so I wanted to develop that relationship, very tight relationship with revenue, very early on, so that when we got to here and I needed them for customer references, they knew who I was and they trusted what I had to say. So now we're in the evaluate and select phase. And there's a few things that are really important here. One is build your scorecard before you start doing demos. And I have one that I will share a link in the chat. It's a Google Drive weighted scorecard that uses some, formulas and such to help you do that. But you're going to group and weight your primary business needs, and then you're going to add all the features that do those things into the right categories. And based on what you can originally find, like what you can find on your website, you're going to start building out that scorecard, and you're going to make sure your scorecard's really well aligned to the problem statements that you had.
Hey, Emily, can I ask you a
Yeah.
question about the scorecard? Because
Mm-hmm.
with you serving, obviously not just your own team, but all the different stakeholders across the org, do you seek input from those different stakeholders as you build the scorecard? Because sometimes when I make a scorecard, it's like I kind of know I'm not coming in like, oh, they're all equal. Like you kind of have your
Yeah.
favorite, you kind of know what you're leaning towards. So you may like have a tendency, just like not you, just one to build it that way
Yes.
to sort of stack the deck a little bit. So is that something you think about, or how do you avoid that? Or
100%. Yeah. And so because I, been at Launch Darkly for a little while, what I did is I just started like some of the sellers that I knew and I'd worked with, I just would send them a Slack message and be like, hey, we're thinking about maybe building this. Can you tell me what's your preference between a workflow maybe that looks like this and a workflow that maybe looks like this? So it really connects to kind of their day-to-day job rather than being like in the weeds about do you want something that does this or this, that they may be like, I don't really know. But if I can say, hey, would you rather like pick your references from a list or click a button that you need a reference and have that matched for you so you can approve? Those are like some of the questions that I'll ask depending on their role. And for like our tech ops people or rev ops people, it's like, do you prefer something that's Salesforce native or a Salesforce integration? Do you have a preference either way? That type of thing. So you really want to tailor those like scorecard questions to what the person's role is.
yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you.
So then when you go to select your vendors and demos, you are going to ask questions that help you complete anything that's missing on your card and really direct that demo. So like don't leave those demos or those discussions without really filling out anything that's unclear in that scorecard. And then lastly, finalize that scoring. So adjust your weights, move your features, and then double check that against your defined problem. That's going to help you really build a business case when you go to ask for budget. I mean, hopefully you've kind of already done this because you've defined your problem. You've said, I'm going to go after and try to find a solution. And that's where you end up. And you should end up with a pretty clear picture of one or two solutions that are going to work quite well that you can then propose and hopefully get approval for. And that is the end. So I'm going to put this slide up here, but I'm actually going to stop sharing and I'll put up the scorecard just to walk you through it really quickly, while I also stop and wait to see if anybody else had any questions.
I do have another question, Emily. I've often been in places that use someone like a go-between vendor called vendor. I don't know if you got no vendor, like they'll do like the negotiation and stuff like that. I don't know if that's something you've had access to, but that can sometimes be helpful. Not on
You
your
know,
criteria, but on like the next stages, right?
um, maybe, but probably not for a customer reference solution because it's just not that expensive. Like I would if I was buying like a 6 cents or like something that was like a big six-figure deal. If it's like sub 50, 60K, that I feel like would take more time than it's probably worth for me.
Yeah.
I'll show really quickly what this scorecard looks like. And I've taken all the competitors out, but this is legitimately the scorecard that I have here. And you can see that I have these feature categories that are here. And then under each feature category, you can add your features. And what happens is you put the capability. So if I put yes here, it's going to change the scoring to give this a 1 and the rest of these to 0. And so you will just do that for each of these sections. And then when you come back to your weighted rating, you'll want to change these weightings. They should all add up to 100%. And it's going to times the total in that column by the weight, and that's going to give you your weighted average here. And then so it's kind of a fun little way to play with it, mess around with your weights, and be pretty objective about how you feel about the platform overall, and just get it all down on paper. So I'll share that spreadsheet here in just a second. See if I got any more questions in here. Measuring the success of RMD. What does RMD mean? Help me out. Reference something.
Amy, that was you. Reference
management database.
Reference management what?
Reference management database. Somebody wrote in the chat.
I would say, does it matter? Like, does it matter? Because I would say there's never any one thing that closes a deal. Like, if you think about it kind of from your perspective, there's a lot of things that go into how you make a decision. And so I will say I don't come from a demand background. And so I actually get really impatient with attribution, like really quickly. It's something that like, it just kind of makes me go from 0 to 60. I'm like, does it matter? Like, does it matter that we know that's exactly why they bought? Because that's not actually how we make decisions. Is the influence enough? I think it's understanding the trends rather than that I can say that this thing definitively did this. It's why, like, for instance, I hate last touch attribution, because like the last thing that you did may not be the most important thing. It may have been something further upstream. And at the end of the day, does it actually matter? So that would be kind of how I would position it to leadership, is like, I would kind of ask them, does it matter? Or, can you say with any degree of accuracy that the demo you did was so fantastic that they were kind of sold from there? I think that would just be really difficult. And my question would be, is that important, or why is that important to know? That does not make me popular within demand gen circles, to be quite frank, because I'm like, that's boring.
It is something we've discussed in the community a few times. Daniel Paley has some similar thoughts on that, where he's like, I don't try to go with the attribution approach so much, but, and these are my words, not his, but touch points to show the touch points that are used during a sale, and how many of those like we produce each year and things like that. So we have a
Yeah.
call, I think, on YouTube where he's discussed that, but he's also working on a talk for this, so maybe he'll come share with us after he gives that talk.
This
Yeah.
is me. I was just gonna throw in there that when I've been at smaller organizations and we're asking them to spend $30,000 on a reference management system, they're like a year later, okay, so how do we justify continuing to spend money on this reference management system? How do we justify spending the money to customize it to what we need, how we need it to work? So that's why I asked the question is because
Yeah.
given budgets and, especially well, I guess it's the same for large organizations too, is that, it's not cheap. I mean, and when you
Mhm.
do spend a lot of money on these and they end up being a library where none of the salespeople are using it, they look back at you and say, well, why did you make me spend this $30,000 when none of our salespeople are using this?
Yeah, I mean, if people aren't using it, that's gonna be hard to show the value. But like I would say you should go beyond just like how many reference calls did we do and how much revenue did that influence. You should be looking at like, is doing reference calls increasing your retention with people who are doing them? Is it increasing revenue? There's a lot of different ways. I would say you just need to be really diverse in how you're deciding what metrics really matter. And the more you can get it close to what it is that they identified as their problem, the better you're going to get at like really proving that value. And so how like I'm thinking about it is I'm going to be looking at do our strat deals start to close faster? Like if we have a reference attached, are they closing at a faster rate than our strat deals that don't have a reference attached? Or if I make a goal to say every strat deal that is in a stage 3 or higher should have a reference attached, we should naturally start to see a higher close rate. And that would just be a trend that, again, can I prove that exactly it came from references? No, but I mean, if it's a trend, I feel, can I sell it to leadership? Probably. I can make a convincing case that we had something to do with that.
Good points.
So, yep, I know that we are over time, but I am always open to talking about like really specific about vendors.
Yeah.
So if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Slack, please feel free to do that. I can send you over my meeting link. I do that a
Emily,
lot, and I'm always happy to talk through that. Mhm.
we're not over time, but if you have to
Oh,
go,
are we?
no, we're
Oh,
not.
why did I think we only had half an hour?
I don't know. It is an hour call, but you don't
Oh,
have to stay if you need
no,
to
I will stay.
for sure.
Yeah, you're right. It's on my calendar for an hour. I'm here for an hour. You can ask me anything you want. I apparently like was way more efficient with my time than I anticipated.
It was a
Can
great
I ask, do you have any vendors that you kind of lean towards that are your
Um,
favorites?
well, for reference management specifically,
Reference management or advocacy? Both.
well, I would say the way I've approached it is you kind of need, at least how I've approached it with my team, is that you kind of need some platform for like customer evidence, customer content, uh, and that can either be a really specific solution or it can be something that you already have in your stack, like a document or digital asset management, and then you would need a reference platform separately. I'll be frank that I don't think anybody is doing both of those really well right now. And I've seen all of the people who say that they do both of them really well, and I'm not convinced yet that that is actually working in practice. So, from a like content collection perspective, we're using user evidence, but I know that Peerbound has a really great solution too. Like both of those are always on my top list when I'm evaluating. For reference management, my top list I would say is depending on your needs, Orca, Champion, Zealot, Dito, depending on the your industry. I would say Dito is really industry dependent, like who your audience is, because remember, you're not just necessarily solving for internal stuff. This needs to be really easy and good for your customers too. And so I had to think a lot about like my customers are developers and engineers, and they're really picky and they don't like sales and they don't like marketing. And so I can't do something that is going to piss them off. And I need to be really careful about what I picked. And also that they have some concerns with, they're a lot more sensitive to like security, privacy, those types of things, maybe than somebody in marketing would be. So those are all like vendors that like are I think on everybody's list. Base is among those two. I'm certain that I'm missing some, but there's like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 vendors, and I think they all are good at least in some situation, but it is just so dependent
Do you have
on
any
who your
opinion
audience is.
about Reference Edge?
I did a demo with them a while back. I will be honest, like from my use case, Salesforce Native isn't my favorite. I don't like working within Salesforce. I don't like working within the Salesforce UI. From my perspective, I think everything has to be in Salesforce in some form or fashion for sales. Like that's just like table stakes, and all of them are in some form or fashion. But when it comes to like Salesforce Native, I think if that's important and like Salesforce is your source of truth, Reference Edge is good too. And same with Slap 5. I think I also forgot Slap 5. Yeah.
Yeah, do you
Thank
have
you.
any specific things that you're looking for? All I see is Freeman for the name, so sorry.
Sorry. It's actually Kathleen. So for some reason it's coming in as my husband's name. But no, I'm just always curious because I haven't always had an opportunity to have budget. Right now I'm between positions, so I'm looking for a new job. But I know I just had an interview with a company recently, and they said, well, if you came in, we'd want you to like think about what system for reference management you'd use and advocacy. And I think that the thing that I've always had to deal with advocacy or reference programs is, how are you influencing the revenue? That's always such a big piece of it. So to be able to report that, once again, it helps to justify if it's a $30,000 annual spend you've done, to be able to say, well, I can track that we, brought in like 4 million in influence. And at least that's a number rather than, gee, I don't know. I have no idea. I just know I've doled out 250 references,
Yeah.
So that's what I'm curious about is, if I move forward in this, what are some other platforms that would be worth looking at?
So I will also
a little bit,
sorry.
and it feels clunky to me, but it's also probably one of the better things that are out there. And then I also was using Base, but to me, I think when I had persuaded the company I was with to use Base, I was looking more for just a database, something really simple and easy to use. It was early on when they were CrowdVicket, and I felt that it was more of like a community tool. It was more engaging customers, and we weren't at that stage yet. We were just like, it's a one-person shop, So I needed something that was just kind of give me a baseline to start with, but please don't pile on all this other stuff because we're not ready, and the culture wasn't ready for it either. It had to be more interactive with that culture. Like you said, to get sales to adopt things, that can be challenging. And they were just starting to get used to Salesforce. So
yeah. And so a lot of that is your seller maturity too. So I'll say like from my perspective, the most important thing for me, like if we're getting into the nitty gritty of like, what was I really specifically looking for, One was that I did not want to rely only on customers that were opted into a program. Again, this is because of my audience, like my
Mm-hmm.
customers. My customers are developers and engineers. They're going to be a lot less likely to opt into a reference program because that's like a hypothetical and it's marketing and it's sales and it feels a little icky. So they, like, if I
Yeah.
ask them, would you be willing to be a reference at some point? They're most likely going to say no. But if I came to them and said, hey, I've got somebody who's considering Launch Darkly and they have a similar use case that I know that you solved a year ago, and I think you would have some really good stuff to add to like how you approached the problem, how
Mhm.
Launch Darkly helped you, things maybe you wished you knew before you got started, that type of thing. I would say like 9 times out of 10, they're going to take that call. But if I'm only dealing with folks that are in my opted reference program, I'm always I always have to do more manual work to find those people. And in the era of AI, what I really wanted was a platform that could help me identify who's not in my pool right now that might be a good fit for this opportunity right now. I'm really looking for AI forward stuff because I work for a SaaS company. I work for a company that builds for developers. We are hosted in the cloud. We have a lot of customer like usage data. But when I was at SolarWinds, we were on prem. Our software was on prem. So I really couldn't use any software usage data to make those inferences. And so that is something that if you are in a business where you don't have that data, that AI, like, trying to find a reference or trying to match that reference, it may not be as important. Or if you don't have, if you're not working for a company that has like a ton of solutions or a ton of use cases and it's really like one use case, that may not be important to you. And so you don't necessarily need all those bells and whistles. I felt like I did. I needed something that was going to save me time and help me get the right reference, even if they weren't necessarily in my pool yet. And so that's where I spent a lot of my time, looking at solutions for anything that could do that for me.
Emily, can I ask a question? It's
Mm-hmm.
be a little bit different, but um, how many customers of the different companies that you worked or you were considering did you talk to? Because I wish I could get more people to come into the community and ask each other because, we have the no vendors channel, but we also have so many customers that if somebody comes to me and says, hey, do you have a customer for Reference Edge that, they were happy or they weren't happy or, all of these things on Reference Edge, Slap 5, all of them.
Yeah.
Because I, again, can you believe just this week got another complaint about a company that was chosen and then the person ended up not being able to successfully implement and, lost their job. And not to say that it's definitely connected, but I've heard this many times from one specific company. I'm not going to say who, but I just wish I could get more people to come into the community and share these things. And your, well, Alexi shared some information in the community. I don't think she'd be upset with me saying she's also very good at like thinking through this entire process. And um, I love what you have said as well.
So in terms of like how many customers that I've talked to, I would say when I did my evaluation for a platform at SolarWinds, I did talk to several people who were using some of the solutions I was looking for. I would also say just like generally broadening your network is going to be really helpful here. The dark web of references is how I usually go about it. I don't mind when a vendor wants to set me up with a customer to talk through, but I like to know because I will say the big problem with references, which is really going to be ironic to say, considering I'm about to stand up a reference program to try to match people, is that I need to know, do they have similar issues or are they in a similar space as me or are we in like the similar kind of headspace? Like, are we approaching this problem similarly? Because I could have somebody from any of these solutions say, this worked super well for me, but like they're running their program differently than I would run my program. And
Mhm.
so I would say I'm always what I'm really looking for in a reference call is how do they feel about the relationship with the vendor? Do they feel like they're a good business partner? Are they shipping, new features? Are they listening to their customers pretty well? Are they a good business partner or are they not? That to me is really kind of the value of a reference is like just getting a sense for like how do you feel about them? What do you like about it? What are they doing well and asking some questions about like what do you think that, some of their pitfalls are? And that is how I usually direct my reference calls rather than looking for like specific features or functionality because I may just be thinking about this very differently from somebody else.
Yeah, that's a good question. Did it help to be in the different communities for our space to like think about these things and find people to talk to?
Yeah, 100%. It's super helpful to have those conversations on Slack. I have a lot of them on LinkedIn too. I will also, if I see logos on a website, I'll usually just reach out to whoever's the reference management person and say, "Hey, your logo's on this website. How do you feel?" I have no shame in like just reaching out to people on LinkedIn and asking them. I don't need an introduction.
Yeah.
I'm kind of bold like that, and so
Emily, I don't know if this will be something you solved for in your current company, but more a question for the whole group. I am running into a situation where I am trying to solve for very distinct business units. And in a sense, I feel like I could do the evaluation that you did for each business unit, and potentially each business unit would ideally have a different platform because of their needs. Um, in from my perspective, ideally we have all of the same platform so that we can see what's happening, across those different business units and kind of from an all-up advocacy perspective. But curious if you have encountered that before, if anybody else has encountered that before and has any tips for solving for that.
yeah. I mean, I will say when we originally started our eval, we had some folks in revenue who had used a platform previously and really liked it, and we ended up not going with the platform that those folks had preferred. And it was for me about like, how do you communicate that then? If they're like, well, I really used this and I really loved it. I knew that when I picked the platform or the vendor that I picked, I needed to make sure that that experience was going to be the same, like just as good or better. But
Hmm.
I also had some additional use cases that I had to solve. And so it wasn't just like, I can't only solve for sales. I have a couple of other things that really we need to be able to solve. And I can't, like, I need one platform to do more than one thing. And so if you can try to consolidate, like, by like ranking, like, what are the most important business problems that you're trying to solve and which solution covers the most of them as possible is how I've approached it. But happy to hear what other people think about that.
No, I think that's good. There's a lot of enablement that I think can go into choosing a new platform that affects so many people and so many different business units. And it depends on how many people you can manage to talk to in your company too. The company I'm in now, we have hundreds of products, so it's a little bit different where we will have to, I think, put out education and then listen for feedback and see what we learn from that. But if there's maybe 5 or 6 teams for the business units, that might be a little bit more approachable to just get their opinions and buy in and, explain things to them. But it's it's different for everyone, I think, too, and it's different for each platform. And I think each of the platforms have different enablement support that they offer as far as education and things like that. So it might also be something to keep in mind as you are talking to the different platforms.
Yeah, what it makes me think of is it's actually that one of our key requirements is that we need a tool that can accommodate that. And we're in the tool evaluation process and we've asked that question. And it's actually been really interesting to me. Like the question that I've asked is, can is there a way for us to really distinguish between like different business units or different user groups within this tool? And I haven't found one yet that seems like it does that perfectly. It's like, yeah, you kind of can, but like you can only configure in so many ways. And I think the business units that we have are very, very distinct. And so maybe that's the key requirement is just that I find a tool that really has the ability to be flexible in that way.
Yeah, and I mean, this may be completely off the wall, but in some cases, maybe building rather than buying is a better choice. Like if you have some really, really specific needs. At one point, at SolarWinds, we were doing some Copilot professional services, to implement Copilot. And I was chatting with those folks about some things because we were considering maybe making some kind of a custom solution that was using Copilot and Salesforce and some of these other things. And that is an option. It's not like the first one that I would go to because there are a lot of solutions out there. But in some cases, like there are definitely people who have built stuff in Salesforce with their own internal Salesforce development teams or using a contractor to build that out. And so I would not immediately write that off. It might be the right choice depending on what it is that you're trying to do.
Does anybody else have any questions for Emily? Or just questions about picking your next platform?
No questions, but this has been super helpful for me in a lot of different ways, and I won't go into the long history of it, but you've just opened my eyes to a few other things that I had not thought about, and I can bring into my next role when I get it. So thank you so much.
You're
Emily,
welcome.
I have a question for you. Hi.
Yeah.
Um, how do you think about if you have like one platform, and it doesn't solve all your problems, like kind of in the space we know that all of the platforms sort of don't solve everything, and you do need to think about a second, and there's overlapping stuff. How do you think about kind of bringing those together when you bring those in? So like you're bringing in a new platform now and you have others. How do you think about making sure they work together or kind of which one you use for which and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, definitely using that weighted competitive analysis to help me understand like what is it really that I'm looking to solve that's distinct and unique
Hmm.
is important. But I would also say like, yeah, which is why like one of the tabs I had in there was like integrations. I knew that I had like all of these things. And so like well does it work within your stack is really, 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 really important.
Hmm.
And like which parts of your stack are most important. Um, it's tough because there are some things that overlap. Like there's a lot of platforms that have semi overlapping things. And sometimes you get a little bit of FOMO that's like, I would like to do all of these different things and I'd like to use all these different things, but I only have so much budget and you don't want a gazillion tools.
Hmm.
I will say the other thing that maybe isn't directly answering the question, but that I do a lot is I will absolutely hack revenue enablement tools for customer advocacy. Because, in my opinion, if something can detect or determine if someone has intent or use signals to find intent, it can probably find intent for customer advocacy. And so, one that we have, for instance, is POCUS. We use POCUS to do like intent signals to find like our SDRs use it, BDRs use it to like find new opportunities. I use it to find people who will leave G2 reviews and set it up with an outreach sequence. I use it to do all sorts of stuff. I try to get like I use Gong. I set up smart trackers in
Hmm.
Gong to try to identify happy customers who I could go after and get testimonials for that are either anonymous or public.
Hmm.
You like as many tools as you can get access to that you are currently using and just think about like how could I use this for my own nefarious purposes. I would recommend doing because you may be able to like splice together enough to do something kind of cool with it and use something that already exists.
Hmm. No, totally. That's
And some of those tools are like really cool. Like we're bringing on like a few, like Hockey Stack is one that we're bringing in that's supposed to like identify the whole buyer journey and like what content they're consuming. So I'm like, how can I build a dashboard that's showing which customer content they're viewing, like customer proof content, and where is that fitting in the deal cycle, and how do I optimize what I'm creating for what I'm learning from Hockey Stack? Like
mm,
all of that stuff is just like thinking about like how do I make this work for me?
mm. Awesome. Thanks.
And you can always ask in the community, say, hey, I'm in the no vendors channel. You probably want to ask, but just say, I'm thinking about these tools and here's my tech stack. What would other people suggest? And it's not just me. I'm not the only one on there. We have a lot of people, and sometimes I'll go to the general chat, and kind of say, we have somebody in no vendors that is looking for certain things, just so we get more eyes and more people to go in there and answer questions. But it's been really interesting, and I love the idea of using as much of the tech as your company's using already, and to see what you can find. And I've done that with the data for customers, and looking at all of that and saying, okay, if I have advocates that do all of these things, what do they have in common about their accounts? Do they use the account a lot? Are they a certain title? Do they do a lot of speaking? Do they like to be on LinkedIn? And then go back and start looking for other customers with similar kind of characteristics. But to have more tools that would help with that, and kind of like look at, those roadmaps coming up and additional features that you're going to be able to use, and how you can use them is interesting. Plus, AI is changing and
Oh yeah.
just impacting everything. So
Yeah, so like I mean, for example, like our PMMs use closed to do those closed won, closed loss analysis. I use that to understand like what is the customer proof that I should be building to solve for the issues that are frequently coming up in closed loss. We have Clay, and so using Clay to figure out how do we help inject more customer proof into what we're sending out, identifying which types of things they should get. We use Mutiny for ABM. And so I will do some experiments on the website to say, can I customize the quotes and case studies that pop up on our website based on the pages that they visited previously, so that we are surfacing the use cases that are most relevant to website visitors? Trying to think, there was another one I was thinking of too that I've kind of used and hacked. HighSpot, to put our content in, outreach to make those sequences, to put all the snippets in. It's really just finding like what are all the, if you look in like what is your sales team using? Oh, another one that we're using right now, or even trialing, I think, is using like an AI avatar for your sellers to have a conversation with executive buyers, because when you're talking to executive buyers, those calls don't happen very frequently. And so some of our newer sellers maybe want to do some practice calls to understand like what are the questions that they're going to ask, even like as much as like what is their energy going to be like, because sometimes dealing with executives can be interesting, especially engineering, CTO. And so it's like, how can I include some stuff in these AI avatars that they're going to ask things like, do you have any customers who have done this? And train them on how to respond. How do you, which case studies are you bringing up? Those are all things that I'm constantly thinking about. Anytime I hear about a new tool we're using, I want to go and learn like how could I use that to further my mission and make everything that I'm doing more relevant.
Yeah, Emily, I really like that concept. It's like, because it used to be like, hey, you have your own customer marketing tech stack and that's all you have. And it's the concept of like, hey, there's the other things out there, even if we didn't pay for them, even if we weren't part of like that decision process, like they can be kind of linked together. You guys seem to have a lot of tech, which is good to like you
Do
like a lot to me. That sounds like, I mean,
a
that's a good problem for you, right? You can like look amongst us.
Yeah. I don't know how much our revenue and like operations teams feel about it, but I personally, I'm like, this is like, I feel like I have a lot to work with. And that may not be true for everybody, but we do have we have a deep tech stack, that's for sure.
I like that.
Emily, what's the mission statement for your program?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I just built it, and really so I am now leading the customer marketing function. And so for me, it's about enabling customers to be successful, identifying what makes customers successful, and turning every customer into a successful customer. That's the gist of the mission statement.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Emily, well, I asked you to do this, but for coming to do this. We always love to have people suggest or share like what they're doing and what they're doing successfully. Um, Emily, you did a great job. I know you've been on with us before, so thank you so much. I will make sure I get this shared out to people probably Monday. Next week, we're going to kind of do workshop around your dashboards and metrics and reporting, and come share what you're working on, what you're having a hard time with, and how we can all kind of brainstorm to make things a little bit easier. So same time, same place. Thank you again,
Thanks,
Emily.
y'all.
Bye,
See ya.
everyone.
Thank you.